Hello everyone, Beanie here, and today we have a very special episode. Special not just in the fact that Scroft has actually trusted me to do this. I am currently sat on my own in his man cave, and I am realising how nerve-wracking this is. I mean, I know I normally help Scroft out with little bits and bobs, but he's normally in the room with me. So today, you've got just Beanie. I did start this before, and then I needed a little bit of Dutch courage. So I have now got a nice big mug of Yorkshire Gold, a nice big glass of wine, and a can of pop. So at least at the end of this, I'll be hydrated. But today's episode is also special in the fact that this is the 200th episode of the Farmhand series, which is just incredible to me that Scroft has got this far with all the faffing and the mischief and just everything. I think it's, hats off to him basically, because I'm now realising it is not as easy as it looks. I mean, I'm lucky I've not got to edit this or anything either. But yeah, Scroft, I guess he's trusted me to do this because I've been rewatching the Farmhand episodes recently, and he said, wouldn't it be a cool idea to do like a trip down memory lane, if you like, for reminiscing with people who've watched the series from the start, or as a good way for people who were new to the series to catch up and understand some of the backstory. So, before we start our little walk down memory lane, I just want to explain how this video is going to work. So, it's been cut into 8 sections, and each section is going to be 25 episodes of the Farmhand. So the first section will be 0 to 25, the second will be 25 to 50, so on. So it's a nice recap of everything that's gone on, and hopefully, we'll enjoy the good memories, the funny memories, and the memories that we all know we've shed a tear or two to. I'm just gonna jump straight in, and we're gonna start with the first section. Blimey, I don't even know where to start. I still remember the look on Scroft's face when he first met George. Poor lad had no idea what he was getting into. He had just come to drop off some groceries for George. Next thing you know, he's accepted a job to work for him. And in good old George fashion, his first job on the farm was to shovel the muck pit, move the muck pit. So it's like, welcome to the farm, grab a shovel. That bloody thing, honestly. Scroft had barely met Mick and Tony when the Ford decided to throw a really big tantrum. But they managed to get it running again. Even if it was a bit like patching up a sinking ship with a bit of gaffer tape. And if you think that's the worst of it, you've not heard about the river incident. Now that was a day. George, bless him, always thinks he knows best. George decided that to fill up the water tanker, he was going to reverse it into the river. Next thing he knows, he's gone too far and the tractor's stuck. He's up to his knees in water and shouting for Scroft like an absolute damsel in distress. You should have seen the state of him afterwards. Drenched from head to toe, and I don't mean to be rude, but looking a little bit like a drowned rat. I mean, good old Scroft pulled him out in the end, but it wasn't always quite clear who was rescuing who at that point. And then, there was those quiet days on the farm where everything just seems to go still. George was opening up about his wife, and Scroft, he just sat there, he listened, he didn't say much. He just let George get it all out. It's hard for him. Even now, it's never easy losing someone that you love like that. It's never easy. But the farm in Calmston was full of memories, but it's also where he found his peace.
But before the wife passed, she used to look after all that kind of stuff for me.
Just when you think things couldn't get any worse, the muck spreader tipped over while Scroft was muck spreading the field across from the farm. I mean, it was just one of those days where you think, can it get any worse? And then, sod's law, it does. Scroft, afterwards, when he was trying to figure out what was going on, had found nails in the field. So he was obviously suspicious about the whole thing. I mean, he was just driving along, the tyre burst, the spreader tipped, and then there was muck everywhere. It was like a scene from one of those slapstick comedies. I mean, you couldn't make it up. And then the Ford broke down. Honestly, I swear down, that thing had more breakdowns than a soap opera character. I mean, the final straw though was when the dealership called after Scroft had taken it in for repairs, and said it was beyond repair. They couldn't do anything about it. I mean, they did offer him a Leyland as a replacement, and Scroft, I mean, he wasn't thrilled. He was so proud of himself for buying that tractor, like anyone would be, buying the first tractor, first car, whatever it is. It's never nice when those things go wrong. But, it's just one of them. What can you do? What could he do? And then winter came and the snow came to Calmston. It was just covered, a thick blanket everywhere. It was insanely beautiful. You couldn't think of a better place to be when it's covered in snow. Maybe not on a farm when you're trying to get on with your work for the day, because as everyone knows, farming, it never stops. 365 days a year, 24/7. There's always potential for you to be doing something. So Scroft spent the day cleaning the yard, clearing all the snow away, the driveway, you name it. And then there was George. George was out building a snowman, even put his hat on it. Sometimes I think that man's part child. But, for all the muck, the broken tractors, and the near drownings, those early days were something special. Scroft wasn't just a farmhand, he'd become part of the family. Him and George together, and George had found someone that he could trust, someone to help carry the weight of the farm, someone to share the workload with. I suppose literally and metaphorically. Then things have been busy on the farm lately. George, bless him, decided it was about time he brought that pond field. Tony was absolutely livid. He'd been wanting that land for ages. I could just see it on his face when George sealed the deal, red like a beetroot with frustration, muttering under his breath. But George, he just shrugged it off like it was no big deal. Then came the build. Oh my god, the chaos. George started the whole thing and suddenly everyone was running around trying to get things sorted. Scroft, poor soul, was rushing about trying to organise everything. But, fair play to him, he got it all done, and then the build was finished, and even Scroft was impressed. He stood there with George, looking around, clearly pleased with how it all turned out. It's not often that you see Scroft lost for words, but this time, he just kept nodding, looking proud of the work they'd done. Just when we thought we could all take a breather, George and Scroft decided to visit Keith about that slurry tanker he was selling. They ended up buying it for nearly $3,000, which, to be fair, was a good deal. But the best part, Scroft couldn't understand a word Keith was saying. And let's not lie to ourselves, I don't think anyone apart from George can.
Thank you.
Keith's accent has always been a bit thick, but Scroft's standing there, nodding along, not getting a thing he was saying. George had to step in and translate it for him, although he did claim it was proper English, so he spoke normally. That was our first section. We're all done, and we're moving on to the second section. Plenty more faffing, rest assured. So these are little recaps from episodes 25 to 50. And we're really getting into the thick of it now. To start off, they had the first harvest on the farm. That's always a big milestone. They managed to get it to the point where Scroft had reinvigorated George into actually, crop farming again and working the land and not just doing his milking and looking after the dairy cows. As important as those are, Scroft bought some rejuvenation for George to get back out in the field. I mean, I still remember George fussing like a mother hen over every bit of machinery, fresh fuel delivered, everything cleaned off and ready to go. It was like, when a bloke goes on a first date, watching him polish his car to perfection. And then there was Halloween. I mean, George, with his wicked sense of humour, somehow convinced Scroft to go into the woods at night to find these so-called hunted scarecrows. It's all just a bit of fun, he said. Little did they know. Oh my god, you should have seen their faces. They both nearly jumped out of their skins. George swears to this day, and Scroft to be fair, they both do, that the scarecrows moved. I don't know. I reckon, it was just a shadow, a wind, or they were all jumped up on anxious energy because George had been winding them up, that they saw it move. Or was it? It wasn't all spooks and scares. There was the Christmas at Calmsden. The first one, they all spent together. Keith even came and joined them, and the three of them had a proper Christmas dinner. Still very proud of the fact that Scroft managed to make that on his own. I normally do the cooking, but he managed to pull that one off. No easy feat, bear in mind. Keith did smash a glass when he was trying to do the little ding 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 for a Christmas speech. And of course, George got that toy truck for Scroft, which I thought was just hilarious considering all the big tractors and the machinery they're driving around. And then there's Scroft in his little toy car. But, what's Christmas without a bit of chaos? The snow put everything to a halt, like we said, but it didn't put him off going out and getting a Christmas tree before all this, ready for Christmas. I don't know what they were quite thinking, but George even insisted in cutting it down themselves from that forest, the very same one where they saw those scarecrows. So I'm not sure if they're having me on here or what's going on, but I know if I thought I'd seen something like that, I wouldn't want to go back within the mile of a place because, I don't need to be haunted by any scarecrows. But, not everything that year was merry and bright. There was a time where George thought it would be a good idea to eat a fish that he caught, that, bearing in mind, he'd left on the side for a couple of days first, before he then cooked it and ate it.
Basically,
and as you can imagine, George got food poisoning. He was laid up in bed for days, looking greener than the fields in spring. But Scroft, good on Scroft, he was worried about George, kept checking in on him. even if he did take the mick out of him for eating the fish in the first place. But, you know, that's the thing about those two. They may bicker and banter and all that stuff, but they are just like an old married couple. Honestly, I do wonder sometimes if that's why Scroft hasn't proposed to me, because he's already married to George. The way they act anyway.
Please don't talk to me about that
I
fish.
suppose it is touching. They've always got each other's back and they're as thick as thieves. And then there was the whole debacle with the Leyland breaking down. I mean, Mick, the mechanic, he wasn't all that hopeful about getting it fixed. And, you know, Scroft went to George, asked for advice, and George got a bit snappy with him. In true George and Scroft fashion, they got it sorted in the end. And Mick, very generously of him, lent Scroft a Volvo that they got on with the planting of the rapeseed. And George, you're going to hear this correct, trust me, even phoned to apologise, which is as rare as pigs flying. It doesn't happen often, as you know. Despite all the ups and downs, they built something special together at Calmston. You know, it's not just about the farm. It's about the friendship they forged along the way. Sure, there's been the muck spreader mishaps, spooky scarecrows, and even about the food poisoning. Through it all, they've stuck together, and that's what makes it all worth it. 2 out of 8 sections done. We'll be moving on to the third one in a second, which is episodes 50 to 75. Can't believe it. Quarter of the way through already. You know, so much has happened already. This section will be episodes 50 to 75. Oh, where was I? Ah, yeah. The time Scroft first went to Brixie's was George. They were off to the dealership to collect a roller and maybe even a new tractor, and you should have seen Scroft's face when they met Brixie and saw all the tractors that he had. Honestly, he was like a little kid in a sweet shop, just so happy. I mean, after they'd looked through everything, looked at all the tractors, of course, they ended up in the pub, having a pint, chatting about the tractors they'd seen, trying to make a decision, and, you know, I think that's where they started becoming proper friends. But it wasn't all tractor talk. Oh my goodness, this one's brilliant. Keith had his hands full with lambs. They were just coming out left, right and centre, and the poor bloke was practically drowning in them. Scroft jumped in to help, but it was like trying to catch water in a sieve, honestly. Bless them both. Still, you know, they managed, but at the end of it, I reckon Keith was about ready to hand over the whole farm just for a break. He'd had a proper day of it. Then there was the day with the pond.
I'll be fine.
You know the one. Some kids had been up and had a party the night before or something and left all the tents and litter, you know, left it all out for Scroft and George to clean up. But when they were up there having a look around, they found a motorbike. And this motorbike was in the pond. And George, being George, ended up taking a tumble right into the pond. Big splash. It was all laughs until they realised that the bike might have been dumped there after some dodgy business. So, you know, they got in contact with the police after they cleaned up, and Scroft, fair play to him, decided he wanted to keep it if, you know, no one came and claimed it after the police had given him the thumbs up. And to be fair to him, he cleaned it up dead well and it looked like new. Things, they weren't always so light-hearted. I mean, George received an offer for the farm from a developer, and you could tell it was weighing on him. You could tell he was torn about what decision to make. He got that farm with Susanna, all the memories there. maybe moving on with Scroft wasn't such a bad idea. It made him think, at least. Eventually, after a few road trips of him and Scroft going to check out new farms and maybe expanding the business in a way, being able to grow the farm in a new place that they wouldn't be able to in Calmsden, they decided to put in an offer for Court Farm, a place with just as much as potential, but a new chapter, clean slate for him and Scroft. I mean, I think one of the hardest days was their last day at Calmsden. They spent it saying goodbye to Keith. I mean, they weren't moving far, but still him and George, best buds, always been so close and living so close together that it's never easy with goodbyes like that.
My last day.
And then they had that lovely moment of sitting down together, having a brew, just reminiscing on all the memories that they'd had at Court Farm, like the time where they had the 4x4s going up into the field with the pond in it. They've not had much luck with that field, have they? But yeah, they had the 4x4s going around the field and they tore it all up right as they were wanting to sell it. So, it wasn't ideal timing at all. But they were also reminiscing on things like when George read Scroft's YouTube comments, and I think in that moment, he just realised just how much people were rooting for the both of them. All the lovely comments of support and all that sort of stuff, it really blew George's mind a bit. And then, probably the hardest goodbye was when they visited Susanna's grave. George had never taken Scroft there before, and it was really such an emotional moment, saying goodbye to her and to the life George had built at Calmsden.
Hiya, love. It's me.
George had made sure a piece of Susanna would come with him to Court Farm. He had a memorial made for her on the harvester, so every time he used it, was out in the fields with it, she was always there with him, and she'd still be with him, even after they moved away to Court Farm. It really was the end of an era, but definitely not the end of their story. Scroft handed over the keys to the new owners of Calmsden and set off for Court Farms. And George, good on him, had even found Scroft a caravan because he'd been really struggling and was a bit worried about where he'd end up staying because he wasn't particularly fond of the idea of crashing with George. So George had managed to find him a nice caravan within his budget from their new neighbours, and all he had to do was, to get the price down a bit, was tell Scroft to go and mow the lawn for him, bit of patch of land for him. So I'd say, pretty good deal he got there. And after all that was sorted, they both headed to the pub where, for the first time, Scroft and George met yours truly, Beanie. Turns out, I wasn't the only new arrival. Scroft had got a call that his offer on a plot of land at Court Farm had been accepted. And, he was over the moon. He was so happy that he managed to get that. Felt like the first real step of moving in on his own farming career, outside of working for George. After he picked up the keys, he came back and he found me and George having a natter. I'd moved my horse to the farm because I'd been keeping her there before, and Scroft was very kind to let me move Winnie back in. And from there, it was all systems go. And then there was the bet. George won. Bet £20 against Scroft by driving his Ford through a mud pit. And the start of Scroft's own plans taking shape. But it wasn't just about the land or the equipment. It was about moving forward and being able to honour the past at the same time. That's what Scroft and George did. That's what they'll keep doing, no matter where life takes them. So, I've got my glass of wine and I'm doing a little toast. Here's to Calmsden Farm to Court Farm until the adventure's still to come. I reckon Scroft and George are just getting started. Moving forward, we're now on to section 3, if I'm still counting right.
Hey everybody, just George here cutting in while Scroft's editing. We've just had a right good chuckle because Beanie's like, oh, we're on section 3 if I'm counting right, but we're on section 4, so I just thought I'd come in and say that. And at the same time, this should be an advertisement why drinking's bad. Ladies and gentlemen, don't drink wine like Beanie does, right? Just try to put the wine glass down, especially when you're making a video. Thank you. See you in a bit. Bye.
I don't drink that much wine.
A few moments later.
Which is episodes 75 to 100. And we start this off, oh yeah, meeting Tim, character and a half. Tim the councilman, who seemed to bring a storm with him wherever he went. I mean, it all started with George and Scroft discovering some weird global warming stickers on George's house. I mean, him and George just never got along from the start. George wasn't happy with the stickers, and Tim was just had one of those personalities where probably only a mother could love. He was already on edge when Tim showed up, and it didn't help that some ducks had decided to take up residence on the farm. I mean, meanwhile, Scroft was busy cultivating fields, fixing up the farm. When he was in the cow shed checking on them, he found a Massey Ferguson. Just an old Massey Ferguson right behind the shed. I mean, quite a find, to be fair. George joked about buying a lottery ticket with their luck, and Scroft got to work on the Massey Ferguson, managed to fix it up, giving George a pleasant surprise. All that training with Mick came in handy. I mean, despite the ongoing drama with Tim, George and Scroft kept pushing forward. Scroft's cold didn't stop him from helping George, fixing up the Massey Ferguson. They even made a trip to Bixie's to look at a second-hand tractor, leaving Beanie, myself, in charge of the farm, which was going well until Tim turned up. So the next day, after Tim's uninvited visit the night before, George's mood, let's just say, soured. After Tim's visit turned into a bit of a fiasco, I mean, George was absolutely fuming about the unannounced audit that he'd told them he was going to be doing. And things, well, they got a little heated, and Tim ended up calling the police. So you can't exactly say it was the best start to their working relationship, that's for sure. But, you know, Keith popped by for a visit, which always cheers George up, and Scroft found himself in a bit of a whirlwind with the ducks and George's grumpiness. The farm was busy planting and fixing, and Scroft took on the task of preparing the fields and sorting out equipment. And then the dreaded audit day finally came around. Tim was auditing the farm, which didn't sit well with George, considering their history. And George was stressed out, but Scroft, all fairness to him, managed to keep his cool. And they even ended the day with a bit of fun of driving the 2 tractors that they had on loan from Brixie to test out, to see which one was better, because George, being George, loves a Ford, and even though the driving course proved the Fendt was better, George was just struggling to come around to the idea of picking a Fendt over a Ford. But in the end, they got the call, they found out the results from the audit, and they passed, which is no surprise, as you know, they run a tight ship most of the time. So they managed to pass the audit. George's mood lightened, and Scroft, in Scroft fashion, made sure to celebrate. And it also meant that they could do the expansion they wanted by getting the extra cows. And then the protest happened. Tim decided to take up shop out the front of George's farm and protest against farmers, which obviously didn't sit well with George. And in retaliation, he set up his own protest, blocking the road right outside of Tim's house, which only landed him a £200 fine. So I don't really know what he achieved doing that, but each to their own, I guess. Scroft, on the other end, was trying to sort out the ducks and tackle, just the daily farm chores, daily farm life. But then things took a turn for the worse. George fell ill. Scroft was out in the field. He got a phone call from George saying he was alright, he wasn't feeling well, but he was in the back of an ambulance. So, of course, Scroft got to him as quick as he could, and it was a bit of a wake-up call for everyone. And then something very special happened in that episode. Scroft got his dad on to talk about his own heart issues, and they did a lovely little fundraiser for the British Heart Foundation. It was close to obviously Scroft and his dad's heart, and the support Scroft got from everyone watching the video who donated, it was just for both me and Scroft, it was so overwhelming, and I know Scroft was so incredibly grateful to everyone who donated. Life carried on the farm even whilst George was in hospital. They were taking soil samples for testing, and he was making strides despite the hiccups along the way. Him and Keith did a really good job to keep everything going, and it was really lovely when George came out of the hospital. Everyone had come together for a really nice surprise gathering at the pub, and you could tell it just really lifted George's spirits, and it was such a joyful moment for everyone having George back, even with his grumpiness. And after that, Scroft and George continued their work, and Scroft finally got the courage to actually ask me out on a date, and we went on a really lovely dinner date together to one of the local pubs.
Do you fancy getting out for a drink one time with me?
Oh, date night. Date night.
As we're coming to the end of this section, George and Scroft's journey is far from over, and there's many more adventures and plenty of faffing on the horizon. So we're halfway through now. We're moving on to section 4, which is episodes 100 to 125. So perfect time for quick brew break, put the kettle on, whatever you fancy. So let's talk about that time where Scroft and Keith decided George needed a mobility scooter. A lovely gesture, really. Perfect for a man who's always on the go, although not always in the right direction. Of course, George's scooter didn't stay standard for long. That man's got a knack for modifications that would make a boy racer blush. And in classic farmyard fashion, Keith, having not been told about these modifications, decided to test it out. Let's just say the scooter and the pond became rather well acquainted. And Keith's driving skills, let's just say, they're more suited to dodging ducks than navigating our dear George's souped up chariot. Then there was the time I decided to get my hands dirty on the farm. I must say the farm life, it was a bit of an adjustment from bartending. I mean, who knew cows were so demanding about their breakfast? Still, I loved every minute of it. While I was getting my hands muddy, George was up to his own shenanigans. George, ever the ambitious soul, won the parish council election. He took his new role like a duck to water, or in this case, like a pig to mud. And let's not forget Halloween. George told us one of his legendary spooky stories, I guess they hadn't learnt from last year, about a haunted castle and a very dubious tree. Now, I'm not saying George is a master of ghastly stories, but when he told Scroft to touch that tree, I'm pretty sure I saw the colour drain from Scroft's face faster than a Sunday roast vanishing off of George's plate. And when that ghostly figure appeared, well, let's just say Scroft's sprinting style could have won him a gold medal. Let's take a moment to appreciate the grand creation of the Fellowship of the Farmers, spearheaded by our very own George. It was like the Knights of the Round Table, but with tractors and a lot more manure. George rallied the local farmers together, and ever there was a battle worthy of an epic ballad, it was the one I can see the song now. Fellowship of the Farmers, a tale of bravery, baling hay, and a particularly large sign with George's face on it. Oh, and who could forget my time in Ireland? Yeah, I took a little jaunt across the sea, leaving the farm in the capable hands of Scroft and George. It was a bittersweet goodbye, but I was looking forward to my opportunities in Ireland. And Scroft and I managed to go on another date before I left. And he did something so special, bless him. He made me a scrapbook. It was filled with memories of the farm, a little note from George and Keith, and a little letter from Scroft himself. Meanwhile, Scroft found himself in a bit of a pickle with the main tractor. Now, I don't mean to say Scroft has a knack for breaking tractors or things, but if there is a competition for it, he'd definitely win. Provided, of course, the prize was a broken tractor. And speaking of competitions, George's new van, emblazoned with a gigantic sign proclaiming George's Sausages, is surely a sight to behold. I mean, nothing says support local farmers like having your face plastered on a van for all to see. And let's not forget the other hijinks, like the infamous story of George's battle with the ducks that will go down in history. Though probably not as a great battle, maybe a bit more of a squabble, really. Now we're on to our next section, episodes 125 to 150. Remember when Scroft and George were deep in conversation about selling pigs? Classic farm dilemma. Too many pigs, not enough freezer space. They went from talking pigs to cows and then to George's grand plan for a new farm build. The man's ambition knows no bounds. Scroft was sceptical about joining the Fellowship of the Farmers, though their attempt tricked him into admitting he got a bias because he was rejecting all the farmers' planning permission, and they were trying to get to the bottom of it, and they were worried about the planning permission for the grand farm build. Didn't quite go as planned. I mean, Keith's sneeze was the loudest revelation ever.
Shut up, bloody hell, soppy fish, stop.
Speaking of plans, Scroft's new caravan was a huge hit. It was quite the upgrade from the old one. Scroft even thought about turning the old barn into an extension for his grass field. But, of course, George had a list of jobs for Scroft that seemed endless. And then there was the saga of the trailer. Scroft ended up buying one off of Jerry after some light-hearted negotiations with Ross. Classic Scroft. But let's rewind a bit, particularly to the heartwarming Christmas flashback. There was George, young and full of dreams, with his lovely Susanna by his side. The Christmas dinner they had was just magical, full of laughter, good food, and plans for the future. Cutting back to the present, there was me, Beanie, showing up to surprise Scroft. His face was a picture, and between you and me, I'm fairly sure I saw a tear. Little tear. Happy for my return, I hope, anyway. And George got the victory in the parish council election. That was another highlight. Honestly, he really pulled it off, despite all the drama and the occasional hiccup, like when he got stuck in the slurry pit. And remember Scroft's crash? Nothing like a bit of off-roading, right? Then there was the false bat report, which was a bit of a low point, really. I mean, George was so excited to move on with the farm build, but his plans had been halted, and he was convinced he'd been cursed for calling Jerry Batman too many times. Scroft tried to reassure him, but, you know, it was a tough day, he was excited for it, and it was a spanner in the works. Still, there were many silver linings, like Scroft's thoughtful gesture of making the hay bales from his grass and giving them to George. You know, that for me was a proper show of friendship, you know. Two of them got each other's back. And then Scroft and I, we decided to move in together. All with George's permission, of course, because we were in the farmhouse that he was renting. It was an exciting new chapter, and we were busy with all the planning and the packing. You know, they were so kind. They helped me move all my stuff from my house to the farmhouse, which is just so lovely of him. And, you know, like always, George's plans for the farm kept evolving. There was the new milking parlour and renting the other farm. And, of course, the endless discussions about the farm build. Scroft was on board with it all, of course. It was exciting for him as well. Although he did dread a little bit of all the hard work, the upcoming work that was coming. And yeah, let's not forget the day George was grumbling about the noisy builders. I mean, those early mornings, they are a killer, aren't they? Especially when your morning nap is being disrupted. But George's optimism never wavered, and he was still planning new projects and dreaming big. I think one of the highlights was when Scroft and George discussed the farm shop idea. I mean, Scroft was buzzing with excitement. He thought it'd be a cracking idea, and George was determined to make it happen. On to section 7. These are episodes 150 to 175. And, you know, thinking back to those days, it's hard not to smile at the memories. Scroft was knee-deep in what could only be described as a full-on prank war with George. I mean, oh my gosh, they were relentless. Then there was the time Scroft and I was buying our first house. That was so exciting. It felt like a proper milestone, you know. And I remember us joking about how we'd need to mow a lot more lawn and, of course, deal with all the quirks that come with a new house. We were both so excited, though, but maybe a little overwhelmed. It was such a huge step, but it definitely felt right. And through it all, George was right there offering his support. But George had his fair share of tough times too, especially with Keith's cancer battle. I still think about those days. Keith was a fighter, no doubt. I remember George would drive him to treatments, and I could see how much it took out the both of them. Keith was strong though, and we all pulled together. It was one of those times that really showed you what friendship and loyalty truly meant. And then there was the storm. Ross got hurt, you know, he hurt his arm, and the damage to his land was pretty extensive. I mean, I recall George and Scroft were out there in the rain and the wind, and then later helping Ross clear the mess. I mean, I was so worried about them both going out in that weather. It was a rough patch, but you could see the community spirit shining through. We helped Ross with his barn and did what we could get him back on his feet. It wasn't just about the work, it was about being there for each other, you know. I remember when Scroft and George reminisced about the old days, when George's wife passed away, and he was devastated. But Keith was there for him, helping him heal. It was one of those heart-wrenching yet uplifting moments in life. Keith's kindness was a balm for George's wounds, and it was in those tough times that I really saw the depth of their bond. Then there was the incident with Keith's tractor being stolen. That was such a blow. We all rallied to help Keith out, doing what we could to ease the burden, even though all the hardship there was, this unspoken understanding and mutual respect that bound us all together. Yeah, the prank wars were far from over. Scroft had come up with a plan to get back at George. I mean, he arrived at the farm at the crack of dawn. You know, hats off to his commitment, hiding 2 ducks in George's kitchen and slapping grumpy old man sign. To be fair, George's reaction was priceless when he discovered the dogs. And Scroft had even put stickers on his mobility scooter basket. And let's not forget the gnomes, the fellowship of the farmers. If I don't say so myself, I think it was a stroke of genius. I mean, we did all laugh about it later, especially after George had convinced Scroft to remove the ducks. Scroft had also baled the hay, and we wrapped up the day with a few more jokes and a brew. It was moments like these, filled with laughter, camaraderie, that made everything worthwhile. I remember when George tried to scare Scroft with that blooming toy car by hurtling himself down the stairs, and he ended up hurting his knee. I mean, we did have a good laugh about that one, admittedly, despite the mishap. Scroft then, in retaliation, had stuck George's chairs to the ceiling from his kitchen table. Although, it was good fun, and Scroft was so graceful to leave one chair not suspended from the ceiling for George to sit on. There were also the quiet moments, like when Scroft and George were checking over the farm's future plans, talking about new equipment, potential sales, and just catching up. It was all those conversations that reminded us of why we all worked so hard. The shared jokes and the endless support, those were the things that made every challenge worth facing. We're on to our last section now, section number 8. So we're coming up to, not the end of the story, but where the story is so far. Oh gosh, I remember there was this one day, I remember it so clearly. Scroft and George decided to investigate a mystery that everyone in town was whispering. Tim had allegedly stolen Keith's tractor, and the whole farm was in uproar. George was on a mission, dragging Scroft into a scheme with the Fellowship of the Farmers to catch Tim red-handed. They thought they had it all figured out, hiding behind bushes and peering into sheds. I mean, it was quite the spectacle. But then, things took a turn for the worse. Scroft climbed a ladder to peer into the shed, and well, you can guess the rest. He fell and broke his ankle. Desperately trying to hide because the police had shown up, because a woman had spotted Ross peeing in a bush. Can't believe it. I mean, I remember the panic in George's eyes and the frustration on Scroft's face as he was carted off to the hospital. I mean, poor Scroft. He was so eager to help. And then there he was, lying on a hospital bed, trying to convince everyone was fine. Then, of course, there was Beanie's reaction. And I mean, I was furious, absolutely livid. Not just because Scroft was hurt, but because it felt like everything had gone wrong. The whole situation was a mess, but George promised he'd sort it out. That moment, it felt like a cruel joke, you know, one of those moments you'd rather forget. And then all those pranks Scroft and George pulled on each other. It was all in good fun, or so they thought. Scroft hiding goats, George putting up signs calling Scroft a clown for hire for kids' birthday parties, etc. They were like mischievous little boys, you know, always trying to outdo each other. And then when it all became too much, they finally called a truce. And I mean, it was a relief, really a relief. Then second-hand day came along, Ross had organised it, and it was a big deal. The day was a massive success. Even if the next day George claimed he had a money hangover from buying second-hand new equipment for the farm. Then it turned into a nightmare. Threatening letters, cows escaping. One of them even drowned. I remember the look on George's face. He was heartbroken. The cow had been with them for years. It was like losing an old friend. And George vowed to get revenge on Tim, who he suspected let the cows loose as he had gone too far this time. Now, as I sit here, thinking about it all, I realised, you know, how much those days shaped us. We faced troubles and triumphs, laughter and tears. We worked hard, played harder, and through it all, we stayed true to ourselves. The farm may have its troubles, and we may face more challenges ahead. I wouldn't trade those memories for anything, because in those moments of chaos and laughter, we found a kind of happiness that only comes from being together, and that's something worth holding on to. So, thank you everybody for watching this far, walking down this road of memory lane with me, and I hope you've enjoyed the recap thus far, all the laughs, the highs, the lows, everything. If you've enjoyed this, please don't forget to subscribe so you can catch the future episodes of The Farmhand. And that's where I let Scroft get back to the hard work and what he's good at. And, you know, if you've enjoyed this faffing, please feel free to give it a big thumbs up. It really means a lot. Thank you, everybody, for being on this journey with us. And here's to 200 more episodes.
Hey everybody, Scroft here. I just wanted to add something to the end of the video. Mainly just to give everybody a big thank you from me, from Beanie, for all the support you've shown me on The Farmhand. I can't believe it's at episode 200. I mean, it's looking bright for the future for The Farmhand with Oxy's new map, and I have mentioned in the video I did for him that I will be moving The Farmhand over in 2025 to Whitcomb Park Farm. It's an outstanding map, and it will allow me to create new stories, new characters, new ideas, and The Farmhand will definitely be carrying on. But if you guys stop watching, then I'll stop making. But if you keep watching, I'll keep making, because I love creating the Farmhand story, and I take a lot of pride in it as well. So massive thank you to you all for taking the time to watch the videos. And yeah, here's to the next 200. I also want to say a massive thank you to Beanie for helping me with this video, for coming up with a really detailed summary of all the episodes. That's like 199 episodes into a bit of a spreadsheet, and yeah, summarized each episode, and then from that created this recap story, and she narrated it, which is outstanding, helped me out a lot, and we did the editing together. The editing has taken a very long time. We've had to get footage from pretty much all the subjects we've spoken about, but hopefully you've appreciated the time and effort that's gone into it. Hopefully you've enjoyed it. So yeah, thank you, Beanie. Really appreciate your help, and I probably couldn't do it without you, so thank you so much. But yeah, on that note, I'm going to leave the video there. I'll leave it with George. I don't think George has ever done a proper outro, so let's get George in here, and we'll get him to tell you all stop bloody faffing and hit the subscribe button and all that.
Right, you bloody heard him. He's set me up now. I'm here now, so you're not getting away with it anymore. Hit the bloody like button, subscribe, because if you don't, I'm telling you now, I'll write a letter to the council and I'll bloody make a complaint about your...
bloody do that.
Bugger off, Ross. This ain't your hour.
But I want to say something.
No, bugger off. This is all about me. This is my hour. I'm technical decision maker, star of the show. I am. Scroft nothing. Don't worry about that. I'm star of the show. Anyway, thank you, everybody. Here's to the next bloody God knows how long. I still think it's strange that Scroft walks around with a camera talking to himself all day when he could be getting bloody work done, but I blame you lot for that. I'm telling you. Right, see you in a bit. Thank you. Bye. Right, Scroft, get the bloody kettle on. We're done now.